This is Monocle on Design, a show where we discuss everything from architecture and craft to furniture and graphic design. I'm Nick Manise. On today's program, typeface titan Johannes Breyer discusses his approach to storytelling through lettering. Plus, a new exhibition at London's Fashion and Textile Museum. It explores the entanglement of fabrics and humans over the course of history. Both of those stories coming up on Monocle on Design. Johannes Breyer is a designer who's best known for his work with Dynamo. It's a Berlin-based type foundry which he co-founded with Fabian Haab, fresh out of university. After years of trial and error, the duo, who didn't study as type designers, won the Swiss Design Award in 2016, which launched them to type stardom. The studio has since designed typefaces for clients including Spotify, Tumblr, and even the musical artist Charli XCX. They've since branched out into making design objects too, including pocket-sized skateboards, also known as fingerboards. Regardless of the project, the studio is committed to making typefaces fun and fairer for more people. Monocle's Alan Whedon recently caught up with Johannes. The creative started by sharing the three things that he believes a good font should have: a great story, gorgeous design, and flawless production.
The story is extremely important for us because, again, we're not the classic trained type designer. So for us, I think for a typeface to add any value to anything, I think it really needs to tell us more than just describing the alphabet or illustrating something in a way that has been done before many times. So for us, for example, we're really interested in typeface that can shift forms so that it talks about elasticity or dynamic elements, or in a typeface we design gravity, for example, the characters can jump up and down. So these fonts, they basically have almost they have qualities that come from outside of the world of type design. So things shifting, things expanding, things widening, shapes turning from round and soft to sharp and angled. This is what I call small typographic stories that happen within the typefaces, or also because of the lack of vocabulary initially, it's okay, this typeface is really, it's a little bit jumpy or something. The typeface feels a bit sad. Not in an esoteric way necessarily, but we really describing what we see in just a human language and not so much in the language of the craft.
So Fabian's your big long-time collaborator. What drew you guys together? Tell me his story and introduce him to, I guess, those who don't know him.
Yeah. So, you could say he's my longest relationship ever, right? With what we do at Dynamo, he is kind of the driving force behind, I would say, most of our fonts, really. He is a true artist, an design encyclopedia, I would say, much more than I am, basically. I met Fabian during my studies, and we both quite quickly started to exchange ideas and send, go to exhibitions together, send each other stuff and snapshots and photos. And then we slowly understood that maybe, or as part of our practice, we find it extremely interesting to also shape the tools that we're working with. So opposed to choosing a font, how about we make our own typeface for that project?
I would like to talk about kind of the formalization. So obviously you two are working at university, thinking about type, the typical kind of story, doing work with friends. When did Dynamo as a business, for lack of a better term, begin to formalize? When did you make the switch from, we're doing stuff for friends to actually we're going to take this seriously?
I think it's kind of been a long road, and also kind of a special one for us because we had many, many turns in this. I think the first commission that we got together was to graphic design the catalog for the Graphic Design Biennial in Brno in the Czech Republic. It was a huge challenge for us, of course. Again, here we thought, okay, this is the moment where we can smuggle in a font. Then, that sounds like all of a sudden, but basically we handed in our, you could say, early work to the Swiss Design Awards and won them. So that was kind of a crazy thing for us, of course, because I think there was 3, 4, 5 years of just doing lots of experiments and crazy stuff basically. And we were awarded prize money of, I think, 28,000 Swiss francs, which is almost the same in euro or dollar. And that was crazy for us to get this recognition, right? To and also get the money, because I think that was both really healthy and needed for us, because on one hand we thought, okay, this seems to be real. Okay, here's the money, you now better do something good with it.
I want to kind of jump into, the spectrum of clients that you guys have amassed over the years. Obviously, Spotify being probably one of the biggest. Now, working with a company like Spotify, it will have all of these, number of different uses and different sort of movement and things to accommodate. How did you even begin to sort of consider what type redesign would be for someone like them?
Yeah, when Spotify came, they basically asked us, we would like to hear from you what you think Spotify should go, design-wise and typographically. And, it's like a 4-line email or something. And I did not think it was spam, but I thought, oh shit, we need to really think about how can we do that? Not in terms of doubting our work, but like, do we want this to impact the next 2.5, 3 years of our lives? Do we have the team set up for that? Do we want to put all our work into this? Or like, does it mean anything else needs to stop? Or like, can we be great in this framework? Okay, so like basically day one, we're like, okay, we can't do that. And then day two, we're like, okay, let's hand in ideas. And we kind of gained this like great momentum and sent them like 100-page long proposal that we worked on like, I think for 2 or 3 months. Really, it was a mix of like us sharing our perspective on where things are going stylistically, technologically, what we think how things can look, what we think pitfalls that should be avoided, trends that should be avoided, like things like that. And out of that really then came the commission, which was amazing because we also shocking and kind of scary, but like they said, okay, let's do that. How long would it take? And step by step, we realized that they can be this could be a great project, that they are really great partners, and they have also thought about this enough themselves. So like we've told them, look, it will take 2 years. And they were like, sure, we thought it would take 2 years. And I think especially in the startup world, this is like, it's very rare that a client, no disrespect, but knows anything about how things work design-wise, and has a timeline, has the budget. But they had all of that. And for us, it also meant doing a lot of soul searching in terms of, okay, we need so and so many people for 2 years. We need a studio space. We had a studio space, but we need to sit in a way that we can do the secret work, right? Because you're signing crazy NDAs for 2 years. You maybe have the new Spotify logo hanging on your wall. Like there's no way that this can go out. So like we really needed to suddenly grow up into this assignment. So like we proposed to do a workshop, and it was our first workshop we ever did, right? Like right and left, I see people doing workshops with post-it notes and so on, but like we cosplayed that. I remember flying to New York, 6 people from our team in a basement of a friend. We were practicing the workshop on the Lower East Side, like with post-its, like with a little projector beaming onto a wall, a rat walking past, like that. And really like I was watching countless hours of YouTube, be like how to do creative workshops, because we knew, okay, this is a possibility for us to just take a step at this whole thing. I think we treat all of our projects really with the same importance, but the stakes are very different indeed, with so and so many millions of users and so on. So like, yeah, they have all these like touch points. They have 400 different digital touch points. So like the Google Watch, but also the screens in the cars, or like, and all the mobile phone, the app, like there's a huge like amount of like screens and resolution and sizes you need to optimize for.
What were the outcomes? So you designed a typeface. So in terms of the app that we all see when we use Spotify and the logo, was that all you guys as well?
Long story short, but we managed to basically come up with a proposal that we thought was refitting, and that was the response to Spotify, like the question, like what does a typeface look like for Spotify, for a platform that has a huge variety of different musical genres on it. And we definitely didn't want to do this thing where we just tell them, look, this is a cool font, and then look very convincing, and they say, okay, thank you, or something. Like we thought, okay, we really need to develop something that works for them, and that's kind of timeless, and it kind of like cannot be used for another company because it wouldn't fit the other company. So like we came out with this proposal that the typeface we're going to build for them also is a mix of genres. And that was a good moment because like there was this huge presentation, like 50 people in the room or something. And once we had laid that out and how we arrived at this conclusion and so on, like everybody just said, okay, that's it. And from the moment then we could really just develop the font, draw everything, draw all the weights, draw 3 different widths. So once we had locked in the aesthetic, we needed to understand how the font needs to be shipped out into the world and what type of screens it will have to display and perform. So like another like 6-7 months went by doing that. and then engineering everything, meaning squeezing out kilobytes of file size so that everything can load fast, hinting everything so that everything renders well, adding like stylistic alternates and like special characters so that, different departments within Spotify can maybe change the tone of the font a little bit, if they want something a bit more classic or something sharper, just like alternates built into the font and so on. Yeah, and I think after basically two years of like designing and producing, spacing, kerning and all that, like they had a font, and then the rollout again, like the implementation, I think took another 3-4 months because so many users. Updating the platforms takes a long time, needs to be done carefully and so on.
Now, the question that I'm sure you've been waiting for, font licensing. I find this one of the most interesting aspects of the business. The reason why I asked the Spotify question first is, did your font licensing rules, do they exist before you worked with Spotify, or is that something that came out of the learning from that massive project that obviously changed the company?
No, like the font licensing model we developed, it started 2018 or 19, like really early when there was almost nothing to sell, you could say. How font licensing has worked in the past 30 years or 20 years is that you install a font on a computer. And if you go on a Type Foundry's website, 99%, when you kind of want to buy your font, it asks you how many computers will you install the font on. And then if you also want to maybe use it in an app, it asks you how many app downloads does the app have. And for the web licenses, it asks you how much traffic does the website have and so on. So you need to give the Foundry a lot of parameters about the future font use, you could say. And I totally understand where this comes from, but right when we started selling fonts, we were always thinking, we don't really understand this model because it didn't feel like it fits our time and how we use computers. Yeah, so we developed this like what we call value-based pricing. We felt that in more cases, looking at how big the company is will give you a feeling for, how much money they make and how much effort and exposure and how much leverage they have to market their stuff. And that's kind of the value that we think they need to pay us. Once we had decided that we want to only price by company size, it also allowed us to get rid of all the other ways that you need to price a font that are very confusing, like web traffic, app downloads, exposure, like all these things that nobody anyway understands really. Like we thought, okay, we don't need to ask them anymore. We'll only ask the people who buy fonts, how big is the company size of your client? And there was a huge simplification in it. And suddenly I felt like I can explain this over a beer in one sentence to somebody. Everybody will understand it and everybody will be like, yeah, that sounds right. So like now company, 100,000 employees or something, they will pay different than a small gallery with 15 people in total. And we felt it's fair and it's easy.
So Dynamo, you don't just do type anymore. You do fingerboards, you do merch, you do, the stool you mentioned is coming out as well. What was the first object that made you start branching out into, hardware? And tell me about the thinking about why you've continued to do other objects.
Yeah, I think the first object was a classic merch piece and very closely related to art school, is based on my bachelor thesis, which I called Different Times. And I was trying to capture this idea around revivals and how a lot of companies and a lot of designers in the history of type have made their own version of the famous Times typeface. So like, that speaks to how the industry has changed, how technology has changed, and like from hot metal to digital fonts and so on. And at the moment we have like 10 different versions at least of the Times typeface around, and they all have slightly different authorship, all going back to the original Times typeface. And yeah, I think my whole thesis was around this topic. What does it mean to produce anything today digitally? And to kind of manifest that, I made this t-shirt design, the silk screen print, super simple in one color, which read Different Times in 5 different versions of Times, on the sleeve, on a chest, on the back, and so on. And yeah, it was like silk screened by myself or something. And it kind of became the first merch piece, I would say. And that like all our friends would wear, we would wear, and like we would like give it away. And like eventually, sometimes you would like walk around in Berlin or like you meet somebody who wore this t-shirt and so on. It was super nice. And also like a first moment of this like community, I think, and so it was like a meme, like a template in a way. When Trump came to power for the first time, we made Difficult Times and like sold it to friends. And then we made like Spiritual Times when we went on a trip to LA and so on. So like, I think like this idea that you could like revisit your own thing and kind of, yeah, that was kind of interesting to us.
And I guess just because I'm so curious about it, the fingerboards, what was your fascination with fingerboards? Did you play with fingerboards when you were little?
Yeah, of course. Drove my parents into like absolute madness. I was cleaning my apartment like a year ago, and I really found my old fingerboard. It was like 20 years old, piece of plastic, really thin. Also the shape changed, also quite interesting to see that. So now the boards are really thick and wider, like I think in skating as well. And yeah, for us, it was a perfect embodiment of like something playful, childish, a weird little thing. Also us growing up a little bit, I'm like 37. So like, I'm not really skating anymore, right? I would break all my bones, but like I can still ride a small fingerboard, It's like just a small, nice object that you can carry in your pocket. Pocket size is always a good idea. And also like, I think you can read so much into it. Like, yeah, this playfulness, something silly, something produced well. It's made out of like 6 layers of wood glued together. And then still connecting it to like, typefaces in a way that says true type, which is of course also like ironically thinking about like staying true and staying like real, which is like topics in the skate world as well. So like, yeah, we collaborated with Kauplai, who's kind of a legend in the field. And we made like 3 different designs, 40 boards each. And we also have built quite a big custom fingerboard park, which is in our studio. So if anybody wants to come in Berlin to skate a little bit, like drop me a line. But we have like custom made a park, and we like sometimes like skating there and like, do little sessions and so on. It's like new ping pong table, you could say.
Johannes Breyer there in conversation with Monocle's Alan Whedon. We'll be back after the break.
What can you learn in a minute? More than you think if you subscribe to Monocle's daily email newsletter. The Monocle Minute provides fresh analysis of breaking news and direct-to-your-inbox insights on everything from global affairs to entrepreneurship. On Saturdays with the Weekend Edition, we'll widen your horizons with wry observation, drinking and dining recommendations, and must-know openings. Subscribe now at monocle.com/minute.
Finally, on today's show, we're heading to London's Fashion and Textile Museum. Textiles, the Art of Mankind, is its current exhibition that celebrates the importance of fabrics in telling stories. It also highlights the role that textiles have played in communicating individuality and sense of self over the course of human history. Tasked with the job of curating the exhibition was Mary Schoeser, a self-professed textilian. The historian is also co-founder of the School of Textiles, a research centre that promotes the study and appreciation for the craft. This show's producer Maylee Evans caught up with Mary to discuss her book, which was published back in 2012 and inspired the exhibition. In the process, they unpacked the journey taken to transform the original text into a standout showcase.
I've always said that a book isn't an exhibition, and an exhibition isn't a book. So this was a real challenge. The difference is that the book follows a more detailed structure. It has over 1,000 images, so it's able to look at surface and imagery in greater detail. The exhibition, it has also come now 13 years after that book came out, and it's really about making the broader argument that human intellectual abilities are all dependent upon the development of textiles. Well, it's a bit like looking at the Earth from space. One has to really stand back and look for the big issues. So the first big issue is string, the string revolution, as Elizabeth Barber calls it, which we can date back by perhaps 100,000 years, perhaps 115,000 years. And so there are 4 cases where we show things: arrows, which are hafted, which is the key process. Now, hafting is really tight binding with a twisted thread. The twist is important because that's what adds the strength to the material. Really more than duplicates the strength. So imagine an arrow with the arrowhead at one end of the shaft and the feathers at the other. The only thing that holds the arrowhead in the shaft has a little slit that you push the arrowhead into, but then you have to bind that slit shut absolutely tightly. And the same with the feathers at the other end. You have to bind those on. And there are 5 examples that show the evolution of the arrows, handmade, courtesy of my butcher, who's a medieval archery reenactor.
Of course.
Good to have friends in the village, right? And hafting is the key early principle of making things, binding things together. So we also have a model of an Egyptian dhow, that's the early ship, and the model example dates from 3000 BC. And all sorts of things. I've tried to make it interesting to everybody. But hafting also is a good place to start because there is also the connection between text and textiles, language. And today in Scotland still they use the word hefted. That's how they pronounce it rather than hafted. 2 decades ago, I heard an aristocrat talking about his estate and saying that he was hefted to the land as much as his sheep were. Because imagine early on with domestication of animals, one did that by hefting them, either using ropes to create a corral or actually using a harness of some kind to put a stick in the ground and hold them down. So we also find that text and textiles are just intimately related. And that's where we start, really, with things that extend the reach of the arm. We have a fishing rod, we have a tennis racket made with gut, and we have a model of a 1912 Wright Brothers biplane, which is canvas wing. All flight comes from textiles. They all start with textile materials. And so there are just little examples of these things that we wouldn't think of. I'm trying to surprise people. So we're aiming to help people to see that the picture is far bigger.
With even just some of the examples you've listed there, it's about surprising visitors and letting them know that this is not just a nice decorative feature.
Exactly.
This is something that is everywhere around us in ways that you might not expect.
I hope so. And we have a lovely big section, the majority of things from the University of California, Davis, which has a remarkable collection, the Joanne C. Stabb Design Collection. And so the main downstairs bit is all about identity and individuality. So
I wanted to ask about this because long before the selfie, we've been making portraits or trying to fashion some sort of version of ourselves. Tell me a bit more about how textiles have helped in doing so.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, the simplest thing to say is that canvas is a textile. And long before painters began painting on canvas, only because it made it movable, you see, made it quite easy. The moving pictures were tapestries and panels and banners, things that were carried in processions. And these, again, we can date back by several thousand years before that. So we've got wonderful examples from around the world. There's a woman warrior dating from not the piece, but the memory of her, dating from about 745 from China. There's wonderful print of Barack Obama in African style, celebrating his election. So we go from one thing to another. These people who do become mythologized, and that's what we see in textiles, is that it's less about an individual self-portrait and more about a culture honoring people that they feel have made a contribution to their culture.
I suppose someone listening might think this feels very far away from what I do day to day, but in some ways the uniforms that we wear every day, even how we decorate our homes also are a form of that.
Oh, absolutely. In 2002, I wrote a book called More is More, an antidote to minimalism. And it's all about arguing that honestly, really, you need to show who you are to your friends and family because that's how you make those bonds within your community, because people come in and they look around and they think, oh, yeah, I'm comfortable here. And it's really important that you're able to signal these things.
I understand that you're also part of the School of Textiles you co-founded, and a lot of that work is instilling in people an understanding and appreciation for this art form, I suppose. Do you think the role of textiles has changed dramatically over history, or are we all kind of doing the same thing? We're all trying to sort of signal who we are, maybe who we'd like to be, or something else entirely?
Well, that bit perhaps is very consistent. I would say, this is giving away how old I am, my influences for this exhibition, the things that fed into it, are 2 key books. My first degree was Bachelor of Science in Applied Behavioral Sciences. And cognitive science has risen up and really expanded in the past 25 years. And there's a wonderful book by Donald Norman called Things That Make Us Smart. And what he says about cognitive science is that there are things that are physical artifacts and things that are mental artifacts, right? And amongst the physical, we've already mentioned, there's paper and there's calculator and there's computers. We have a section that explains how computers come from the loom. But the mental artifacts are reading and arithmetic and logic and language. But arithmetic, mathematics in particular, is really one that's really significant. And so I suppose what's changed is, what worries me is, what should worry everybody is, that the youth of today are losing the opportunity to learn how to use their hands, to learn the skills. Because all of the cognitive science actually has proven we have more nerve endings in those two fingers than anywhere else. And it's now proven that contact, that kind of grasping of things, actually lights up larger areas of the brain, including the primitive brain. And so again, going back to that language sort of trade-off, you're not just grasping the material, you're grasping the idea. You're grasping the possibility. You're grasping creative, inventive ideas. Now, if we don't have young generations who are actually being given the opportunity to mess about with stuff, to make things, we're losing that really important human ability to think our way out of difficult situations.
New textiles and fibres are always in development, with new technologies, machines, digital applications also maybe becoming more and more prominent. But are there ways that we can maintain that sense of the tactile that you're talking about, whilst also making the most of what these advancements might offer? Do they need to be opposed, or is there a way that they can work together?
Oh, absolutely. And one of the things that the industry is really doing is revisiting recycling, because, of course, it's only in my lifetime that throwing things away was invented as a fashionable thing to do. It's centuries old. And so revisiting it. And so we have interesting examples of how the industry is going about that. In fact, visitors can see first sight of a Liberty recycled furnishing fabric. It's called Tana Reborn. Listeners might have heard of Tana Lawn. And every high-quality textile manufacturer does not allow the sale of flawed textiles. So they had piles of Tana Lawn that had been rejected because the standard just wasn't quite high enough. And they've taken that and they've ground it down. The term in woolen is shoddy. Many people know that word. And they've ground it down and then they've respun it and they've used it as a fiber in the furnishing fabric. And it makes this wonderful, slightly flickering quality across the cloth. So this is a real first for people to actually be able to see this, and wonderful that Liberty are doing it. And they're they're leading in this understanding that consumers are knowledgeable now. They want to read the labels. They want to know how things are made. So it's down to us. We are in it together, really. We need to read the labels. Tencel is the good rayon. There are others that are not. We need to learn about this and make wise choices. It's not about giving things up. It's about buying more wisely and ensuring that at the end of the cycle, you've got something that can be recycled again.
My thanks to Mary Schoeser in conversation with Monocle's Maylie Evans. Textiles, the Art of Mankind, is open at the Fashion and Textile Museum in London and runs until the 7th of September 2025. And that's all for today's show. For more design stories, listen to our 5-minute midweek bonus show, Monocle on Design Extra, which airs on Thursdays. And if you enjoy print, then do pick up a copy of Monocle magazine as well. It's on all good newsstands now. Today's episode was produced and edited by Maylie Evans. I'm Nick Manise, and you can reach me on nm@monocle.com. Thanks for listening.